Hello there, Evie here. I talk too much and that's kind of why this video exists. Basically, at the end of the LD03 review, I made a comprehensive conclusion, which is what this is now. And I asked the people on Discord, I've made like a 30-minute review already, and I made a 20-minute conclusion. Adding that onto the end is ridiculous. Would you think it would be beneficial if I were to make it into its own kind of video, a sort of conclusion video that I tag onto the end in like a, hey, this is something I'll be making. If you want to watch it, stick around. So hence why this video exists. If you haven't actually checked out the LD03 review, this isn't the best place to watch or get sort of I don't know, visual content of the case. I'll do bits and bobs here and there, but nothing major. This is more for people who have watched that full review or just want a sort of more of a discussion about good, bad, and indifferent bits of the case, which is what I'll be covering in a second. So, I've done about 20 minutes of chatting about the case, which will come in a second. This is what I previously recorded, and I will just cut bits in and stuff like that to preface what I'm saying during, if you have or haven't watched the previous video, the LD03 review. So, thanks to Ben, who answered me on the Discord, who said it could be a benefit to the channel and could help out people who want to watch my content, more about the LD03, and it could just help the channel generally with the YouTube algorithm. So I kind of agree with those points, and this may become a mainstay depending on the feedback from this one and the next one, and maybe a couple after, depending on how timing goes. So, cheers guys, I hope you enjoy this one, and again, I talk too much and I apologise. It's something I'm trying to work on, and my current remedy is making more videos out of my rambling. So, let's get on with the comprehensive conclusion. Anyway, let's get into this. I said 20 minutes I spent last time. So, pros, looks, very subjective of course. You pay a price for all the tempered glass. There are other cases that look just as cool, if not cooler, around the same price point, depending on your point of view. There are cases like the Fantex Evolve Shift, Shift X. Those are pretty cool looking cases. They're much taller, a little bit smaller I think on the footprint. It's all subjective, that's down to you. Cooler compatibility, 190 millimeters. Huge amounts, more than I think any case I've actually reviewed actually. So yeah, 190 millimeters. Pretty damn insane. I had 155mm cooler, and we've got loads of room left to slot in something bigger. So if you wanted this to be an editing system where you're going to be CPU bound rendering, that sort of thing, could be perhaps something to consider. If it's for your channel maybe, and you're going to be having it on view, it could be something for you. So moving on, GPU compatibility. Huge GPU compatibility up to 309mm. I can guarantee and confirm that is the case. Wouldn't go above 2.5 slots. Would stay quite comfortably below 2.5 slots, more towards the 2-slot card, because it you just get closer and closer to this side panel, and I'd say there's probably maybe 8mm, if not a touch less, of space between this 2.7 slot card and the side panel, which is just really condensing the amount of sort of intake there is for the fans on there. I wouldn't go down a blower style cooler because they just get very loud and they're thermally, just not very effective cooling, if you get what I mean. So yeah, wouldn't go down blower style, but yeah, stick below 200 watts. 2070 is below 200 watts, but bear in mind they do have some pretty thick coolers on those things, so just 2 slots and below 309mm, as wide as you like though, because cards don't generally go that wide. Panel removal, very, very quick, very simple, very useful actually for getting access to your power supply unit. I'm going to make a hash of this now. Oh, that came off actually quite neatly. It doesn't take a lot of effort to take that off. I will put that on the side there. I'll leave it open for now. You probably didn't see how bright the lights are inside. The panels actually do have a darkened effect, a tint to them, which reduces the light that comes out, of course, and makes it slightly towards a sort of a black finish, especially when you look at it from a tight angle. So yeah, panel removal is very simple. These ones just clips on the side. They just virtually effortless to take those off. Very useful for getting around to the power supply unit switch on the side if you needed to do some tinkering. Small footprint, mentioned earlier, small footprint. Other cases around the same price point. This is about £99, towards like 140 plus pounds, plus $200 in America. So, you know, look around, I'd say, for a good price on that if you really wanted this one. You have other cases around a similar price point, similar footprint-ish. Like I mentioned, the Phanteks Evolve Shift X is probably one of the closest ones off the top of my head, or the Shift or the Shift X. So they are, you know, relatively similar. So yeah, it's probably worth looking around at, you know, those and perhaps seeing which one you fancy. But yeah, pretty small footprint, a lot shorter than the Phanteks Evolve Shift, which is like over 400 millimeters, you know, towards 500 millimeters, half a meter tall. So yeah, just, you know, something to consider. Decent drive options, a 3.5 inch and a 2.5 inch drive, or two 2.5 inch drives. But yeah, I kind of feel that as a missed opportunity, there could perhaps be a little bit more room or there is more room to fit more drives in. I think going off the, what is it, the Q300L, the Cooler Master Q300L system of slotting on 2.5 inch drives onto the motherboard tray, or the offside, just off the side of the motherboard tray, where you attach screws with rubber grommets and you slot those into the panel with holes cut out. It's a very material efficient way of doing it, not that much more sort of costly, or not much more expensive than the way that it's being done here, with just some screws, just some bigger screws and some grommets and some larger cutouts. So yeah, I think that's a really good way of doing it. And then you could back-to-back slot 2.5 inch drives on the panel as an option, or you could have, say, 3.5 inch drives on one side, or one 3.5 inch. You know what I mean? There's options to go there with that. Good manual mentioned earlier, lots of instructions, pretty decent instructions. I think my favorite part, which not a lot of manufacturers do, is adding in lots of dimensions for the GPU. And there's lots of dimensions for the top panel. There's loads of dimensions in there, so pretty good overall. You can, you know, pretty much map a lot of things out based on that. Do a small SketchUp model and just, you know, size-wise, check out how things will work out. So yeah, pretty solid on that front. Next up, I'd say good air-cooled thermals. I think it's pretty solid. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going for a render rig, something CPU dominant in terms of the tasks that you run, then you've got a lot of space for a massive CPU cooler and some really solid ventilation. GPU-wise, not so much. That's on the con side, so not a lot of ventilation up there. So I would, yeah. Before I go on to that, let's go on to the cons, and we'll get to that in a second. So, cable management. No cable management basically in this system, apart from a little bit behind the motherboard tray, and that's only, you know, maybe 8 millimeters, if that, of cable management space behind there, maybe even less. There's barely enough room. If we're talking, or if we first start on the cable management holes, the smaller one off to the side, the one I basically didn't use, is, to me, it's virtually useless. I don't think there's much that can go through there that's worth routing, you know, up and then down through there. Unless you want to add in a fan extender cable, which is fine, but you may as well just tuck it and hide it through, you know, and just take it straight down the case rather than off to the side, and then, you know, it just, yeah, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, that one. The larger one is, larger hole for cable management behind the motherboard tray is bigger, but not really that much bigger. It barely fits the USB 3 cable, or cable connector through, and then when you add in the power supply unit EPS connector for the CPU into the motherboard, through that hole it just gets so crammed. So what I would perhaps suggest is removing the smaller cable management hole, because it's virtually useless anyway. I would move down the drive panel, and then I'd make the larger hole that's there now even larger, and it would just make it a lot easier. So that would be my suggestion for that. To add to that, the top I/O or rear I/O that's at the top, not the top I/O, not the front I/O that's at the top, it's the rear I/O that happens to be at the top, not the rear or the bottom, which normally is where you'd find it, at the rear or the bottom. It just happens to be at the top. I would like to have seen that have an option to be able to route the cables down so that they exit through the base, like I mentioned before. Now, if I was going to propose a potential solution to that, I would say that there's a half-baked solution going on down the side already with regards to the small hole where you slot the power supply unit cable through and then route it out down the bottom to pass through to the power supply unit here. So from the pass at the top down to the bottom. Instead of having that, I would actually create a small duct, imagine it like an elevator shaft or a lift shaft. You've got the main core, and then you've got the holes cut out, obviously, around the sides of the walls there, so you can stick in the elevator doors. So basically, remove the doors out of that, downsize the thing, make it out of thin metal, and slot it down the side here, and you'll have yourself a channel you can run things all the way down and exit out the base of the case. So you don't have to go all the way backwards. Now, I understand that, you know, you could flip the motherboard, the whole thing the other way round, but then that makes access to the underside of the motherboard tray a little tricky, and that's, you know, difficult. I understand why they did it this way. Just on that note, actually, there is 65 millimeters of space up here, and you will see here that I have managed to stick the ASUS wireless adapter, which wasn't in there when I did thermal testing, I promise. So, but you can fit that in there just about, and it extends the range of your Wi-Fi if you have a board that has a Wi-Fi thing. But yeah, you can't really put it flat though, because it would just block, you know, the ventilation. But anyway, so that shaft idea I think is a good idea. Also, I think you could design it in a similar way to the way snorkels are designed. You know, the snorkels are designed at the top, where when you blow out water, generally when it comes down, will trickle down the sides. Have that, but not so to extreme, so that you can feed cables up and they won't poke randomly out of the side. They'll get fed and knocked up by the panels up to the top, where they'll poke out and you can slot them into your motherboard, if you know what I mean. So something like that, where like the air out of a snorkel, it goes up and it gets funneled towards the top, out the top, and any water that comes in it generally trickles out the sides and doesn't go down the shaft, so you don't get the connector when you're pushing it up all the way up having an issue where it just like sticks out the side of one. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's getting too far. Poor GPU ventilation. Yeah, if the GPU thermals are okay, you just got to make sure you don't go too far above 2.5 slots, or 2 slots, and you know, I wouldn't go close to 2.5 slots than is necessary. So we've covered that. Small power supplies only. This feeds into the size for an ITX case. Quite a large size for an ITX case in terms of literage, but that might not matter to people due to the smaller footprint. I would argue you could fit an ATX power supply unit in here, although that would encroach on other potential additions for that space, such as, you know, I noted down here, lots of unused space. You could use that for water cooling. Fit a big pump in here that's mounted off the fan at the bottom, you know, or pump slash reservoir, or reservoir, whatever you fancy, that's slotted into the bottom. Imagine this goes away and you get a mount for that, and you have a big reservoir all the way up in the center here. That would look really freaking cool. So potential there for something to go on. So I think this, due to the price of it and the looks of it, is worth water cooling. If you want to see me do a water cooling video in a few months with this thing, then I'll hold on to it. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I might not bother, because it's probably old news by that point. Panel rubbing, slight wear. I mentioned earlier, removing the side panels, you know, off and on and off and on. Yeah, a little bit of wear coming there. I don't think it's something that's going to spread and you're going to start flaking off. It's a pretty gritty finish. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Just, you know, something that I noticed but doesn't actually visually impact your the look of the build once everything's on. Missed opportunities, been over already. Optional cable management exit at the bottom, and the option for a second drive panel. So there we have it. That is the end of the comprehensive conclusion of the LD03 review. Thanks to SilverStone for sending the case. If you like this format, then please let me know. Let me know how you watched it as well. If you just skipped past bits, if I droned on about certain things too long. If you want me to make it a little bit more concise, maybe make you know, crush things into like a 10-minute span. I'd probably have to drop certain bits here and there, which is something I don't want to do. The kind of content I want to make, or I like making, it takes a long time and it's quite strenuous and tiring to make, but making content where every base is covered, where basically if you have something that you wanted to know about this specific thing that I've reviewed, you will be able to gain it by watching the entirety of the video. Sure, there'll be bits you don't want to see, but there will be bits that you do. So that's the kind of content I like making, hence why I don't want to drop things from the conclusion. But if you just think it's too long and drawn out, then I'll try my best to make it more concise. But if you like the off-tangent ramblings here and there about certain things, it's not unrelated to what I'm doing, but you know, if you want to be a bit more concise, then please let me know. But that's basically it. So thanks again to SilverStone for sending the case. If you liked it, then please like, and if you didn't like it, then obviously don't like the video or dislike the video, or just don't like it and leave. That would be probably better for the channel, so I'd appreciate that if you took that into consideration. If you want to see more like this, please subscribe, and otherwise I'll catch you in another video in the, I would say, near future. That's probably a little bit, I don't know, stretching the term, in the somewhat near future. So yeah, that's about it. Cheers guys, catch you in the next one. Bye bye.